We're going to get started. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And just in case you forgot where you're at, welcome to the Grand Blanc Township Regular Planning Commission meeting, July 6, 2023. First item on our agenda is approval of this evening's agenda, and I do think we want to kind of shift some order on a few things.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if we could, I'm going to give you numbers next to letters. That's going to be the easiest way to kind of redo this, if you will.
Under new business that you're looking at.
Yes, so E, we're asking to be number 1 now. C to be number 2, D to be number 3, A number 4, and B number 5. So basically, we want to do the special land use and the site plans first, and then we'll do all the text amendments at the end.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda as amended by Mr. Smith.
Or,
Motion by Mr. Anderson, support by Mr. Yancho. Any further discussion? If not, a vote is in order. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 7-0. Approval, oh, thank you. I skipped past roll call. I'm doing everything out of order today. From Planning Commission, we have Mr. Andre. We have, let me look at my list here. We have Ms. Hugo, Ms. Coulter, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Gillings, Mr. Yancho, Mr. Bush.
I just saw Mr. Hoffman walking in, too.
Oh. Make sure he gets the sign-in sheet.
No.
Okay.
There's Jeremy Smith, our Planning and Zoning Administrator, and from our planning consultant, it's Andy, and I'm still not clear on how to say your last name.
Amont.
Emot. Okay. Thank you. Let's see if we can. Next item would be approval of the minutes from June 1st, 2023.
Mr. Chairman, I've reviewed the minutes and they are in front of you. They are slightly different from the ones that you received in your packet, but they are now correct. And I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Support. Motion by Mr. Yancho to approve the minutes as corrected at your position, at your seat here. Support by Mr. Bush. Any other discussion? All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 8-0. All right, next up is an opportunity for public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on anything that we don't have a public hearing for this evening. And we do have a few different public hearings. We have public hearing regarding recreational vehicles, so that's going to come up in our agenda. Let's see, what else do we have here?
Public hearing for Randy Wise.
Special land use for the Happy Kids Childcare and special land use for Randy Wise. Is that the 3 that we've got?
Yes.
So if you're here, you want to address the Planning Commission on something other than that, this would be the time. Need you to come up to the desk.
Hello, sir. My name is Ines Al-Kadbani.
You-
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, this is for you're on the agenda.
Yeah, you're already on the agenda, so this is for anything outside of
Oh, I'm
anything on the
sorry.
agenda.
Yeah. On the left there, Mr. Bandersky.
leave the card right up here.
That's fine.
Made me fill it out, so please use it.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So this is what the commission looks like from the audience. It's been a while since I've seen that. I would like to thank the Planning Commission and the consultants for your support of myself over the past several years while I served on the commission. Your personal and professional friendship, your patience with me as I exercise my secretarial responsibilities, and a special thanks to those of you who came to the trustee meeting when I was recognized by them. I really appreciate that. The past several years on the commission have been educational, enjoyable, lively, serious, and sometimes very long. And especially very rewarding to be part of the development of the township and the direction that it's now heading. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else on my left who wants to address the planning commission? Not anyone on the right?
Top that.
Okay. We will close the public comment portion, bring it back up to the planning commission. Correspondence. I do see something from Mr. Smith here.
That, we'll tackle that at the end. The MAP conference, is that what you're referring to?
No, there's an email.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about that now. That is from our social media specialist. She's asking that one or a few of the planning commissioners be taped for, they do a Township Tuesday social media post every week, and she's asking if one or two of the planning commissioners would actually come in and speak with her to kind of explain what the function of the planning commission is and what your role is in the planning commission. So she's asking for one or two or three. It's 10, 15 minutes of your time. Come in whenever she can make the appointment with you and be recorded, and then they'll post it on the township social media.
So if anyone's interested, contact you or?
Yes, please. I'm hoping I have some volunteers, because if not, I think I'm going to have to do it, so. Hoping there's some actual appointed planning commissioners that would like to take on this task.
Are we supposed to discuss this? And
You can just send me a message, email, or however you want to do it if you're interested. We don't have to discuss it further tonight if you don't want to.
Okay, next item on our agenda would be old business. I don't think we have any this evening, do we?
None.
That would bring us to new business. So under the new numbering, the first item we're going to address here this evening is special land use 23-002, Happy Kids Childcare. If we get you up to the,
podium? Go ahead.
yeah, first we'll have her give us a kind of an overview of what you're asking for, and then we'll ask for some comments.
Hello, my name is Ines Al-Kadbani, and I have a license for family childcare in Grand Blanc. And with the current license I have only 6 spots for kids. With my kids, I have 2, so I can only have 4 more kids. So I am trying to get a license for a group childcare where I can extend the capacity from 6 to 12 kids in my in-home childcare.
Okay, that's kind of overall general what you're asking for. Mr. Smith, is there something that you want to address?
You want to have me do my report?
Yeah,
This
that'd
time?
be, that'd be perfect. Do your report, and then we'll go back, see if there's anybody in the
Okay.
public that wants. You can have a seat if you.
Thank you so much.
So this is special land use for for case number 23-002. The address in question is 2291 Lake Ridge Drive. Sits on .39 acres and is currently zoned R2 single family. The proposed project at the address will be to expand the existing daycare home to a group daycare home. The group daycare home is regulated as a special land use and requires additional approval for this expansion of the license. The following state standards for a group daycare home for a special land use must be met. There can't be another daycare home within 1,500 feet, or adult foster care or large group home licensed within 1,500 feet, or a substance abuse treatment or rehab center, or a community correction center, and those items have been met. All outdoor play areas shall be adequately fenced by a minimum of 4-foot 6-inch non-climbable fence, and this has been met as well. Property shall be maintained consistent with the visible characteristics of the neighborhood. This item has been met. And the home shall not exceed 16 hours of operation during a 24-hour period. Operation between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. may be limited but not prohibited by the township. This has been met. Sign regulations of section 5.19 shall be met, which spells out that there can't be any signage basically showing that it's a commercial business. It has to stay residential, per the other standard as well. And this item has been met. Adequate off-street parking shall be provided for all employees, and adequate off-street waiting space shall be provided for the parents, and item has been met as well. Planning and Zoning Department would support a recommendation for approval based on the following reasons. The requested special land use is compatible with the surrounding land uses, and the special land use standards for a group daycare home have been met.
As the applicant, have you seen his report? Okay. Any questions from planning commission members at this time?
Mr. Chair, a question for
Mr.
staff,
Andre?
please. Do you happen to know how many other locations, similar locations there would be in the township of a similar use?
My understanding, I don't have all the numbers, but Laura,
Roughly.
I don't know of any in the area,
Okay.
no. But I know Laura has all those numbers, but I don't have them on hand, no.
Mr.
I
Anderson?
think the answer is yes, based on the photographs, but I wanted to understand, this home has a walkout basement?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is a special land use. We will open this up to the public, so if there's anyone that would like to address the planning commission now, this would be the time regarding.
My name is Joe Massey. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association, Grandview Lake Association. And our bylaws prohibit a daycare center. Any additional information, our bylaws prohibit a fence in the neighborhood. So I asked the planning commission not to approve it because it's going to create also additional noise in the area. Our bylaws prohibit noise that will affect your neighbors. So our bylaws do not favor a daycare center. And I understand that you said a 6-foot fence. That's against the bylaws. So
4 foot 6 inch, but go ahead. Not 6 foot. 4 foot 6 inch.
bylaws prohibit a fence, period, in the subdivision. So when you talking about a traffic congestion, the bylaws prohibit that. Anytime there's a party, it has to come before the board when there's going to be additional parking in the area because neighbors complain about additional parking. And so it has to be approved. Anytime the homeowners association give an event, a residential event, it has to be approved by the membership of the homeowners association. So we try to preserve our neighborhood to be one of the best subdivisions in Grand Blanc Township. So I asked the planning commission to not approve this because it will affect the value of our homes. So far, the value of our homes been on the rise, As a matter of fact, they have doubled in appreciation. So we all are very happy about that in the subdivision. So any change to the bylaws from the planning commission will affect the neighborhood drastically. So I asked the planning commissioner to please consider not approving this.
Thank you for coming and addressing the planning commission. Appreciate it.
You have a question for me? Oh, I saw you raise your hand.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll go through all the we'll go through the public hearing, and I've got some, I'll make
Is
notes.
there anyone else that wanted to address the planning commission regarding this? Yes, sir. You have your name and address?
Kurt Bettendorf. I'm at 2292 Lake Ridge Drive, so I live directly across from this home. And while I like my neighbor, I would not like to see additional traffic going past my house, or at least going into the driveway. My mailbox is actually at the corner of her driveway. There are two mailboxes, hers and mine. I don't want to have any issues with my neighbor, but I don't want to have a business in the subdivision. I know that would be a lot more traffic. We have a lot of cars in our driveway, and we don't typically let people park in the street. So I have a feeling there'll be more cars that are in the street, making more congestion. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to address the planning commission regarding this special land use for the Happy Kids childcare? Now we'll close the public hearing regarding this special land use and go to, I don't know, is there our planning consultant or Mr. Jeremy? I've got more of a question as to what do we have control over versus what does the state have control? That's my biggest question.
We'll get to that. I'll let Mr. Bush go first.
Mr. Bush, you got a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess in light of what we just heard, a couple questions. One, it's operating as a daycare now. So I guess, I don't know who to direct the question to, but it's operating in a subdivision that doesn't allow one. It's currently doing that. So I guess that is the homeowners association, how's that work? If it's not allowed, yet it's already allowed, those don't work for me. You can't have both.
Yeah, that's my question regarding what do we have the ability to control versus what is in state control that we can't touch.
Right, so the in-home daycare that she currently has is regulated by Laura, which is the state of Michigan, Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. They have full control over the in-home daycare as it sits today. They didn't have to come get approval from us. The only reason why she's here tonight is because the expansion, we require it as a special land use, before she gets that extra expansion license, she needs approval from you guys tonight. So you have control over that today, but the homeowners association not allowing it, that's the fight between them and the state of Michigan, not between us. We have our rules, and she has met all of our rules as it sits today, and her expansion meets our rules today. If the HOA has more restrictive rules, it's between her and the HOA to get it approved. If we want to do this as a contingency, that's your prerogative, but she has met all of our restrictions and all of our special land use requirements for the expansion.
That covers my question, Mr. Chairman. Just have a comment on that. I totally agree. I think we have to abide by the rules of the state of Michigan and Grand Blanc Township's ordinances. Enforcing a subdivision HOA contract is not.
Kind of similar situation as if you don't allow, he got into fencing. Well, if an HOA doesn't allow fencing and we allow it and they come apply for a fence permit, we cannot by law stop that fence permit. Sheds, same thing. Decks, same thing. As long as they meet ours, we by law cannot stop that permit from happening. If the HOA wants to fight it, it's on the HOA to fight it, get their own attorneys involved, and get it stopped.
I wish Mr. Laddie was here this evening.
I would almost 100% say that he agrees with me. We've had this similar situation in Davison before, where I came from, and we had this exact same thing. He said the exact same thing. So I,
This puts us in an unusual position, I think, as Mr. Bush was alluding to, that, what do we have control over and what don't we have control over? You know, it's just, they're not aligned, it seems like. Mr. Bush.
Just, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to reiterate, the pictures I saw show a fence. So to me, it's obvious that the HOA doesn't care about them having a fence because they have one. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. I guess I would need clarification, and my opinion would be to, again, I agree with Mr. Anderson. We have to follow the rules, Grand Blanc Township and the state of Michigan.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I was just going to follow. I agree with Mr. Smith. I think it's clear. Basically, our job as planning commissioners is to look to the zoning ordinance, and if it complies with all the requirements in the zoning ordinance, then I think we have an obligation to approve it. And the homeowners association is a totally separate issue that doesn't come under our jurisdiction. I mean, our jurisdiction is to make sure it complies with the zoning ordinance, which it does.
I did not get that packet. I don't hit the packet.
There was additional one out at the table this evening. You didn't get this portion of it?
No, I didn't.
Mr. Smith, you mentioned the word contingency. Are you talking about a township approval contingent upon the state approval? Is that what-
no, I was more referring to the HOA, but I think that's even, I don't think by law we can stop it. Like
Yeah,
I
that's
said,
what I
it's-
wonder.
I don't, their rules are more restrictive, and if they want to enforce the more restrictive rules, it's on them to enforce them, not us. They meet all of the items that we've put forth in front of them, and they've met every one of those to the T. So I don't think even a contingency at this point would be a valid.
Well, either way, she's gonna have to get a permit from the state, right? So,
As soon as I sign off, you guys give approval tonight, she's gonna take that and take it right to the state and then give her approval.
this is a little unusual, but I would like to allow Mr. Massey to make a comment.
I would like to make a comment. Mr. Paul Bush stated he saw something about fencing.
Like to see the pictures?
No, I'm very familiar with that.
Okay.
But I just wanted to clear that up to make sure everybody understands why the fence is there. The fence is there because of a swimming pool. The prior owner installed a swimming pool, okay? And the township requires, if there's gonna be a swimming pool approved by the township, there has to be a fence. It has to be fenced in. That's the only reason the fence is there. I just want to clear that up and make sure that you guys understand the fence was not put there for a daycare. Okay? Because if I understand what you guys are saying, is that you guys can overrule the bylaws. Because what happens, if the bylaws says there cannot be a daycare center, then the resident can be fined up to $2,000 or $3,000. That's the bylaw, okay? So I wanted to make that specifically clear, that the resident can be fined. And when the resident is fined, first notice is sent to the resident to notify the resident that if it's not rectified, there will be a fine, and that fine will be placed against the lien, will be a lien against the property.
This is interesting. Mr. Hoffman.
So I think we're missing a couple of things here. One, we as a town, the state tells us what we can do. The township has made rules for the township to do. Every subdivision is in their rights to make things more restrictive, and as long as the contract is signed off by the homeowners and the HOA, but that is settled at the HOA. We have no authority. We are not, if this is granted, which it looks like it should be by law, we're not telling her that she can break the bylaws. We're just saying that we can't stop her from doing anything further. So the bylaws are there for, I mean, and if you've got a contract, you're exactly right. Put liens on, do this, but that's all handled at the subdivision level. We have no jurisdiction over that. You can always be more restrictive, as long as both parties have agreed to that, which I'm sure they probably had to when they moved in there. So, no, we're not telling people to break rules that they signed up for. We're saying we don't have jurisdiction over those rules that they signed up for.
Any other discussion, Mr. Andre?
Mr. Chairman. Can I, a question to the applicant, please? Could you tell me how long you've currently been operating under your current license? I can, it's fine.
Well, it won't pick up, we gotta do minutes, so yeah, if you could, please come up to the microphone.
I received the license currently in April for the family home child care. So I've been,
April 2023?
yes, April 2023, that's correct. Do you want me to go back?
And how many current children do you have?
I have 4 currently.
4, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chairman?
Mr. Yonch?
To the applicant, how many employees do you think you might have if if you do open that daycare center expanded?
2 employees,
Two besides yourself?
like 1 with me or 2 beside me.
Would they be at the same time?
It should
Follow
not
each
be. It depends because usually even when the kids come, it's not even, let's say we have full capacity, which is 12 at the same time. Because some parents, or like usually most of the parents, they would like to come in a part-time instead of full-time. So nobody will be there. Like you will never see like a 12 cars at one time coming to the driveway. So I'm assuming it shouldn't be a problem for my neighbors, especially that the space for the driveway, it should accommodate that, and they shouldn't have like any problems.
What are the ages of the kids that you would anticipate having?
It's between 0 and 5 years old.
Okay. And you have some children that come to your daycare center now. Are any of them from your neighborhood, or are they from the Grand Blanc community?
So part of the ratio I have to count from LARA regulations. I have to count my kids part of the ratio. So I have 2 of mine and 2 other ones from like within Grand Blanc community. So they're not from neighbors yet, because like I have like, for example, if I have a child that is less than 1 year old, the ratio is 1 to 4 instead of 1 to 6. So that's why I've been like full capacity, which is like 4, because I have 1 kid that's less than 1 year old. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I think so. I have an additional question, and in general, without knowing the demographics of that particular subdivision, are there a lot of younger children of working parents who may need your services?
A lot. That's why LARA and the state of Michigan, they're running like a lot of grants for, such as, let's say, Michigan Improvement, the Michigan IFF grant. It's for the Facility Improvement Fund, because I believe Governor Whitmer, they set like, I think it's $34 million towards a goal that is building 1,000 daycares by the end of 2024. So there is a huge need, and for the economic reasons, a lot of families, they're unable to work in hospitals such as nurses, doctors, because they were not able to find a childcare for their kids, so they were not able to go to their work. That's why we see a lot of shortage in the like working power. So that's why Michigan, they need a lot of childcare to be opened, and I'm trying to be like part of that to help the families to be able to go back to work, knowing that they have their kids in a safe place.
I think I read that you are going to operate under a Montessori principals?
Part of the curriculum we have like some Montessori vision in it.
I know, you know, it's helpful from our school system to have children who enter our school system to have certain skills,
Absolutely.
both social and academic-based skills.
Absolutely.
So that's the only questions I have, I think.
Thank you so much.
So it doesn't look like we have any choice here. That it meets our ordinance. The state is really the one that has jurisdiction. We have a competing HOA that has a different view, but there really isn't anything that we can do. I'm reading this, is that correct?
100% yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Anderson?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve special land use 23002 for the in-home daycare as presented by the applicant. And I'll add to it that it meets all of the criteria for our zoning as well as the state of Michigan.
Support. Ladies first.
Motion by Mr. Anderson, support by Ms. Coulter. Any further discussion? All right, vote is in order. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 8-0. So I guess you're gonna have to take it up someplace else, Mr. Massey.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, next item on our agenda is special land use 23001. Or Randy Wise Toyota. Is this also a site plan? Ah, yes, it's a separate number, but it's a.
Yep, so we'll do
two
the
and
special land use first, Mr. Chairman, and then we'll do the site plan afterwards.
Thank you. So, does the applicant want to kind of give us a general overview of?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the council, the commission, Mr. Smith. Chris Enright, architect, 628 East Parent, Royal Oak, Michigan. Here this evening to request special land use approval and preliminary site plan approval for the new Randy Wise Toyota dealership on Holly Road. Here this evening with us is Mr. Wise, the namesake of the business, our project manager, Phil Marcantonio. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the current Toyota dealership, which shares space with the Mercedes and BMW dealership as well. So all three are strange bedfellows under one roof, and so each one of these each companies wishes to have their own space, and so we're going to create a Toyota dealership first, and then BMW and Mercedes will remain in the current building and share the rest of that space within that building. Mr. Wise has already purchased the property in question, which is on Holly Road, essentially where it meets the railroad tracks north of Cook Road. So he's already committed to the property, invested. We've been looking at this project for a better part of a year, trying to figure out the best way to put the dealership, the parking, fit all the landscaping and all the requirements within the township in that unusually shaped piece of property. We're in receipt of all the comments from the township, from the planning consultant, from the road commission, and we can meet each one of those comments without issue, and we'll be making those changes for our final site plan. We are not seeking any variances to the project, and so with that, we wish to obtain approval and here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions from planning commission members before we go to report? Do you have a report that you want to review, Mr. Smith?
So we'll do the special land use first. Well, do you want to open public hearing first before we?
No, go ahead. I'd like to get your comments so anyone that's here that wants to address it can hear.
Okay. So this is special land use 23-001, vacant land on Holly Road, 5.66 acres. The applicant is Randy Wise. The zoning is flexible development 1. Proposed project on South Holly Road will be to construct a new Toyota car dealership. New automobile sales is regulated as a special land use and requires additional approval beyond site plan review. No specific site standards are required for new automobile sales, but the following special land use general standards must be met. Special land use must be consistent with the goals, objectives, and future land use map described in the master plan. That item has been met. Special land use will be consistent with the stated intent of the zoning district. That item has been met. Special land use will be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained to be compatible with and not significantly alter the existing or intended character of the general vicinity in consideration of environmental impacts, views, aesthetics, noise, vibration, glare, air quality, drainage, traffic, property values, or similar impacts. This item has been met. And lastly, the special land use can be served adequately by public facilities and services such as sufficient roadway capacity, police and fire protection, drainage, and water and sewer facilities. This item has been met. Planning and Zoning Department would support a recommendation for approval based on the following reasons. Special land use is compatible with the surrounding land uses and the special land use standards for new automobile sales. The general special land use standards have been met.
So I think we'll open it up to the public for the special land use. We'll get into the site plan after that.
Yes.
If there's anyone here that would like to address the planning commission regarding, I guess, the appropriateness of the special land use for a car dealership at this location, now would be the time to address planning commission. Anyone like to address the planning commission? If not, we'll close special land use 23-001. And I also, I guess, wanted to comment that if any previous business, as we complete each item of business, and you want to leave, feel free to leave. If you want to hang around, hang around. It's up to you, so.
If you need me to sign it tonight, or if you want to come in tomorrow morning, I'll be in the office tomorrow morning. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen the document, so I'd like a chance to review it before I signed it, so. Okay.
All right, so the thing in my mind that's a little bit unusual with the special land use is that if we separate it completely from the site plan, are there any conditions that we want to apply to the site as part of the special land use?
There's no specific standards that are here in the special land use that haven't been met. So I think if there's any conditions, that we can add that on as the site plan review condition for approval. Because this is still preliminary approval, and there's a list of things that they're missing. So if there's something else that we want to add, we can add that under the site plan review.
Any other comments from planning commission members? Mr. Anderson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, question for the applicant, something I've noticed on this, and I've seen at other car dealerships in our area, and that is car haulers that arrive to drop off new vehicles or pick up vehicles such as these turn-ins and so forth. There's nowhere that I can see on here, and maybe they could explain where these car haulers would park while they do that. Because what I've seen at other dealerships is they actually park in the middle of the road in the left-hand turn lane and use that for the loading, unloading area. That's a fairly busy intersection there with the Light and Brook Road and so forth. So where would that take place?
That's an excellent question. In fact, Mr. Weiss has another dealership where they have those similar challenges. It's a smaller footprint, and the vehicle has a very difficult time sort of navigating its way through the tight spaces, and they have to actually park off on the street, which is actually sort of it's not on the main street, it's sort of an adjunct street, but it's still a public road. In this situation, knowing that we had previous experiences with that we ran several truck turning radius calculations throughout the site. The truck would come in from essentially the north entrance nearest the dealership, and then it would turn south or left, and then there's enough room to navigate in that area that you can see it sort of widened. In the south portion of where the service area is, the truck will park there temporarily. Those will be vehicles that were being for display, and the truck will then turn back out going east, back out onto Holly Road. So it'll essentially do a U or a circle coming in from the north, turning around through the parking lot and going out through the south.
Page C202, there's a 10 by 50 shaded area.
That's actually the page I'm on, yeah. Does that make
On the very back, There's a 10 by 50 shaded area. That's the unloading zone.
Oh, okay.
That, thank you for pointing that out. That is a designated loading zone. That will work. That the truck and that's designed for that to be there. We did that for Toyota essentially too. But the likelihood is that the vehicles will essentially go into that other shaded area, which is lighter in that area that I was talking about. Either will work. The back area too was meant for access for fire vehicles and emergency vehicles to be able to circulate around the building as well too. So, but that is a designated area for loading per the zoning ordinance.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess hearing Mr. Anderson's concerns, I think possibly a truck turning radius diagram should be shown on site. I mean, I really appreciate your explanation. However, that would be nice to see the turning radiuses on the site to know that they don't hop curbs and hit something as they turn. And I don't see that, so I think that might be a requirement we need to see.
Part of the site.
It could be part of site plan, sure.
Smith?
I was gonna say, we're kind of getting into the weeds here a little bit.
That would be more of the site.
And just for food for thought going forward, this has been seen by our fire marshal and has no issues. I understand your concern for the turning radiuses, but the fire marshal has had no comments.
To follow up with the question though, our standard package for final site plan will have all the, both the car hauling radius, fire apparatus radius, and other delivery truck radii as well too. We're happy to
We can
provide.
add that as
Sounds like
an
they're going to.
addition to the.
Absolutely,
site plan.
happy to do it.
What I was gonna ask, and I think that probably answers the question, is if we approve it, make a contingent on that, and I know that you guys have planned for it and accommodated for it, and it's beautiful on paper, but you guys won't be sitting there when that car hauler pulls up at 7:30 a.m. in the morning, so I wanna make sure that that's allowed and clearly enforced by the management of the dealership at that. Sure.
Can I say something about that?
Absolutely.
When we looked at this, it's a great question. One of the first things we,
Because we got a tape.
I'm sorry, Randy Wise, 12511 Margaret Drive, Fenton. When we looked at this, one of the first things we looked at is where we're going to put, where the truck's going to unload. Right now, unfortunately, where we're at, because there's no room, they're unloading on Saginaw right now. I mean, on Holly Road. You know, so if you're coming north on Holly Road and you're there at the wrong time of the day, there's a truck unloading. So we hope to, we're going to alleviate the issue better, much better than it is now. Now, as Mr. Enright said, I have places for trucks to go everywhere. I get around pretty early, and some truck drivers just don't go where we tell them to go. So I don't need the truck unloading police to sit there and watch. But if I'm there, they're gonna park there, and all our people will know that. So they will have a designated zone. But I store in Fenton. I went out the other day, and truck's out in the middle of Owen Road unloading cars. You know, different truck driver, whatever. But I can honestly say this was a very big concern of ours. I drive up and down Holly Road all the time, and I don't need a truck sitting there when I'm driving. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Applicant, and no further questions from me.
Should the special land use be contingent upon final site plan approval?
You have to approve the special land use to move forward, otherwise there's no reason to approve the site plan. Because if the special land use dies, then
No, but I'm saying
Project does.
if the special land use is approved, and then for some reason, the site plan doesn't get approved for whatever reason, do we have a?
then that special land use for new car sales stays with the property.
It does.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But still, they would have to come in for the site plan to have it actually used as a car sales. I mean, just because it has a special land use doesn't mean that if that site plan fails and the special land use stays with it, that doesn't mean that they just get to come back the second time and do whatever they want. I mean, you still have to get the site plan review.
Yes, 100%.
It's not that much of a challenge to have a special land use ready to go because the site plan hasn't been approved yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Great. Just because you approve the special land use for an automobile, and if the site plan doesn't go through tonight, and somebody wants to put a Burger King on it, a separate special land use for the drive-through would have to be added to that site as well, and then a Burger King could be put on there at site plan review. So they're just saying this is what they want to do with it, and if it gets approved, it stays with the property. And it can be done, but the site plan would have to be done additional to any special land use, yes.
Mr. Bush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm struggling with that, and I understand it's a rule. But my struggle is an applicant coming in and paying for special land use. And then say site plan fails. And then another applicant just gets special land use on someone else's dime, which doesn't make much sense to me. But I guess if that's the rule.
I mean, if we would review it, and if they didn't meet any of the standards, obviously it would have to be reapproved. And Mr. Amott said that if there was, in the ordinance, it says they have to, any special land use has to be used within a year, otherwise it would have to come back for, again, for any other additional approvals.
Hoffman.
And if the property was going to be sold, if it already has a special land use on it, that's a value, they just charge more for the land.
Correct.
Possible, yeah. Okay.
As long as it's within that year.
Right. So they don't lose out.
Any other questions regarding special land use or comments from planning commission members? If not, the vote would be in order.
We need a motion first.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
I will make this motion as well to approve special land use 23-001 for the Randy Weiss Toyota dealership as presented.
Motion by Mr. Anderson, is
Support.
support by Mr. Bush. Any further discussion? If not, we'll finally get to the vote. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 8-0. All right. Preliminary site plan review, SPR 1131 for Randy Wise Toyota. You want to go? We want the applicant? Is there anything we need?
I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to add to it? Mr. Henry? Okay, so, the site is 5.66 acres. It's currently in Flex 1. Zoning to the north is general commercial. To the east is offices, to the south is office, to the west is mobile home park with a railroad in between. Applicant intends to construct a new Toyota car dealership. The plan indicates 22,500 square foot for the building and 227 parking spaces for new cars on display, employees, and customers. All of the dimensional requirements for setbacks are in compliance, as well as all of the parking setbacks are in compliance. There's no additional requirements that are warranted for this type of building and the building's proximity to the surrounding uses. The parking requires 2.5 spaces per 1,000 for interior sales and 1.5 for 1.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of exterior display, plus 3 for each service bay. 217 parking spaces are required and 227 parking spaces are shown. This does exceed the maximum spaces allowed. The planning commission does have the right to allow for more parking up to 20% over the maximum. So that's one thing we'll have to take into consideration when we get down to approvals. Exterior lighting, planning commission requires a photometric plan. The plan provided will need to be revised, showing that 0.00 foot candles along all property lines will be required before final site plan approval. No fencing is shown due to the applicant using plantings. For perimeter landscaping, 1 canopy tree, 4 shrubs, or 1 evergreen and 4 shrubs for every 30 feet along the north, east, and south property line, rounded upward. This standard has been met. However, along the west property line abutting the mobile home zone property, the ordinance requires 2 canopy trees, 4 shrubs, or 1 canopy tree, 1 evergreen, and 4 shrubs for every 20 feet along the property line. The standard is not met due to insufficient planting shown, but the planning commission has the right to reduce these requirements. The planning and zoning department feels that the placement of the railroad and the heavily wooded parcel owned by the railroad abutting the west side of the property prove that the amount of planting shown is sufficient. So that's another thing we'll have to discuss for approval. Planning and Zoning Department would recommend, support a recommendation for preliminary site plan approval based on the following, understanding that the following items will need to be rectified before final site plan approval. The updated photometric plan with a cut sheet showing details of the fixtures and poles. Number 2, the PC reduced the landscaping requirements along the west side abutting the railroad. Number 3, the planning commission allow the applicant to exceed the maximum number of parking spaces allowed by 10. Provide stormwater management plan sheet and provide drainage calculation and drainage sheet per row. Number 4 and 5 were conditions from Row Engineering.
What's the date on your letter? Make sure I look at the right.
June 13th.
What's the date on your letter? I want to make sure I capture that.
My review,
Yes,
June 13th. Oh, for my review or for Row's review?
your review.
My review is June 13th. Also in your packet, you have from Gregory Boggs, our Assistant Director to the DPW. He has comments for the water and sewer that need to be rectified as well. And they will, which will allow them to, in conjunction with that and the drainage calculations from Row, they'll have to submit all that to Genesee County agencies as well.
Questions, comments from planning commission members?
Well, I guess I'll make the first comment, and I already put it in my mind, and Jeremy Fruiff as well, is I don't think we have to worry about the landscaping between the railroad tracks. I don't think there's gonna be anybody that's gonna have any visibility of it, and I don't see the railroad having any problem with that as well, so I have no problem allowing that variance.
Is it a variance?
It's not a variance.
No? Okay, what's the word?
Planning Commission has the option to reduce restriction, or reduce requirements.
Oh, that's, I'm looking at the lighting one right now. The plan, and maybe this is for the architect, the plan that's submitted to us right now, is that your proposal then for the trees? Because we got, aside from the very corner of the lot, which is visible on the road, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trees along there. That's your proposal?
With the landscape plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is all proposed landscaping, yes.
So that's just part of it. If you flip to the next page,
Yeah, and then I see
There's
that.
a- yeah, there's
Right
more.
after I finish speaking, there's
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 more.
right, but compared to what it has on Holly Road, it should mirror that based on, actually it should be more dense because the mobile home park is considered residential. But you have the railroad tracks, then you have the easement that's owned by the railroad that will probably never be built on. And then you have the mobile home and also from my understanding, the mobile home parcel is wet and is low. So they will probably never, ever build on that portion of the mobile home property anyways. That's to be seen, but just so you're aware of the whole situation over there.
Okay. Yeah, looking at it from Holly Road, I'm very familiar with the area, and I think the railroad tracks are elevated, quite high, and I don't see any issues with that.
Mr. Yancho?
On sheet L 2.2, the identification of the trees is cut off on the north side of the property. So it's hard to tell where each tree is going to be planted. Where plantings are shown, what type of tree will be planted there in those locations. And I'd like to ask if you could possibly put the code for those trees within the circles.
Yeah, we'll just probably end up moving the whole sheet over. It got obviously cut off in the title block, so it's a great
I think
point.
it's easier for us,
Yep.
myself, to, when I look at a particular tree location, to have those 3 letters designating that type of tree.
Yeah, that's actually a good catch. I didn't even see that.
On that same sheet, just a note for you, within the building, you get the square footage and the finished floor elevation kind of text on top of each other might be something you want to correct.
Mm-hmm.
What about, I guess I've got a question about the detention basin, and as close as that comes to Holly Road.
Oh, yeah, here. All of them.
Mr. Bush, you have something?
Nope, no, sir. Just answering a question.
I'm just a little bit concerned about the screening. I don't want to put a lot of tall, pines or anything to block the building. But is there any advantage to putting something that stays a little lower where you can still see the building but will help to screen the detention basin? I don't know what your thoughts are on that as the applicant. Because right now, most everything is deciduous trees along Holly Road in front of that basin.
One, we might have a couple of trees along the Holly Road side.
What's the concern? The concern is to screen the detention pond?
Yes, I guess give some screening. We've got deciduous trees there that, fall, winter, probably not going to get much value in the way of screening from that. We typically try to put the detention basins in back. And that's-
Yeah.
That's why I'm just thinking, as a trade-off, maybe if there's some evergreens that don't necessarily grow real tall.
Yeah, it's an unusual site, right? Everything drains to that direction. It would have been a lot easier for us had it drained the other way, but we're working with Mother Nature here, so that's why it's in the location where it is.
Tell you what, I'll list it as consider. How's that?
Okay.
And then when we get to the final site plan, we'll take a look.
Yeah, I mean, I understand wanting to screen the view from some portion, but obviously that's, driving up north or south on Holly Road, you want to make sure you get that building, we don't want to block the building too much, but
Yeah,
maybe there's
that's what I'm
something
saying.
lower.
Get something that's a little
Something lower and is green all year long to block that. Sure.
From a light level standpoint, there's one item that's always been difficult to achieve in our ordinance, and it doesn't look like you're complying with that portion of our ordinance, and that's the average to min ratio on the lighting. Any comments on that? Because I know typically car dealerships, you get a brighter, but we've also had, we've had other car dealerships come in. I'm not looking for more light, just want to, I guess we can take a look at it and get at least closer to our average to min ratio, 4-to-1. The numbers that I saw in here, I thought were more in the range of 20.
So your concern are the ratios?
Yeah, they get hot spots, darker spots. It's
Yep.
a little more uniform.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a challenge, right, to get zero at the property line and still get enough illumination in the middle, especially when we're as skinny as we are. But yeah, I understand. We'll certainly make that attempt to get that tighter and closer to that.
Mr. Andre?
Mr. Enright, just a couple questions, if you would, please. Could you give us, I think you had brought up the road commission. Could you give us a quick rundown where you're at with approval submittals with some of the agencies, with the road commission, the drain commission and such?
Sure. We have submitted to Road Commission, obviously, and Drain Commission. Now, our understanding is that the road and drain, and I'm not addressing you on purpose because we're talking to Mr. Smith about this, that they're going to continue to review this through this process, or we need approval here first before they finalize it?
You don't have to, but after today, the typical process is they come in for preliminary site plan approval, and then they submit to all county agencies except for road commission through our DPW department, and our DPW department walks it through for them, so in case it ever gets held up, we can make a phone call and say, hey, where's it at? They get all the they get all the approvals through all the county agencies, and then they come back to us for final site plan approval.
Sure. No, I appreciate that, and the reason I ask is, I see the original submittal was back in February. So I thought by now you may have received some feedback as to that, because one of the things, being through the process before, what happens is, through that review process, it could characteristically change some of the elements of the site plan. So having that feedback as soon as possible would be, as Mr. Gellings brought up, the detention basin. I think there's items that need to be addressed there with the Drain Commission. Doesn't meet their current standards. There's going to be some significant modifications to the detention basin. The other thing I was asking about the road commission as well, because some of the landscaping that I see right along that area, there's a clear vision triangle right at those driveway entries, and there's a lot of planting, which is great because it gives a great formation of where the entrances are, but it also inhibits the clear vision at those locations. I'd be a little bit concerned with the amount and also the varying height of that landscaping at the immediate entrance with a clear vision out on Holly, because we know, as Mr. Wise had said, you don't want to be out there, traffic travels pretty quickly. And so that's some of the feedback I would have thought you'd maybe receive from the road commission. And I just wanted to search out where you were with that, because it might change the characteristic of the site.
Right. Well, those are excellent points. We do have comments back from the road commission. They have actually weighed in, and it's in our packet. There wasn't anything necessarily about the vision, but they have weighed in, and they have actually, our main concern was that they're going to have an issue with the actual locations of the driveways.
Driveway locations look good, they're aligned with the
Right.
cross. That's
Correct.
a starting point. Great starting point.
Yeah, and having two versus one, a lot of times with access management, they want to limit that, but we need the two for access for this particular parcel.
Regulations, totally makes sense, especially
Right.
for this type of use, so.
Correct.
I'm sure you'll work with staff
Absolutely.
consultants on these outstanding items, as they come along. And I'll echo what Mr. Anderson brought up with the supporting of the reduction in the landscaping along that western side. I looked at the elevation of the railroads up at 875, the finished floor is 865. There's some natural buffer there, so I echo that as well. And then with the additional parking, I would have no issue with a couple extra parking spaces as well. Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to address that, because that's a great point, and I wish every municipality I ever dealt with said that. I mean, I can go to another one real close to here, and when I pull out, I can't see either way, but they've got the trees they want, okay? Our line in our business is the cars are the stars. And I'm not against trees, I'm not saying that, but we got to be careful where we put them. And so I just want you to understand, I know exactly what you're saying. I've got to go like this, pull out on the road, because the tree hangs down so far.
Exactly.
And that won't happen.
So just be cognizant, and I think work with staff on that, on the locations of those plans.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anything else from planning commission members?
Yeah, I just have a question following
Coulter?
on the parking, because in the report here, you exceed the parking requirements by 10 spaces. Two questions, I guess. One is, do you really need those extra 10 spaces, and if so, why? Because I think if we're going to approve additional spaces, we ought to have some justification for that.
Well, if I can speak for Mr. Wise, I think we'd like to exceed it by 100 if we could, but, because that's our inventory, that's where we store the vehicles, and that's actually a display essentially where people walk and see the cars. So that's where we store our inventory for sale. So we actually, in other dealerships, have significantly more parking spaces than that overage that we like to have if we can. So for business purposes and for for inventory purposes, we need those extra spaces.
Okay, yeah, that was basically, I just, think if you're going to go over, the zoning ordinance says there's a maximum, there ought to be some explanation, and what you're saying makes sense, so I just wanted to make that point, and I know
Absolutely.
Mr. Smith, you have a comment?
before.
To that, if you remember this, you've had this packet before, but it never got to the actual meeting. They were going to exceed it way past 10 before, so they've actually reduced that overage. So they're doing what they can to reduce. It's just my point.
I would just suggest in the future that if what the applicant intends to request additional spaces, there be at least some explanation.
Sure.
Why that's needed, otherwise we're just ignoring the zoning ordinance.
Correct.
You know.
Yep, I agree.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Smith, we're looking to approve this tonight.
Yes.
And we can make that contingent on some of the requirements that Mr. Boggs
Yeah,
has put in his letter.
I've got a list of some items here. I don't know if I've captured all of them. I propose I'll read this out. And
So this is preliminary approval, right?
yes, with the following conditions is
Yes,
what I'm
okay.
proposing.
Thank you.
Okay, that was my question. But this is going to come back to us for final.
Either it can come to the group as a whole, or you can give me the authority to do it, however you see fit.
For site plan committee.
Yes. Or the site plan review committee.
I think that would make sense.
All right, here's a list of what I've kind of written down as I've heard different conversations that I would propose that we do grant a preliminary site plan approval with following conditions. That you will provide a truck turning radius drawing with the final site plan. Correct a landscaping plan to identify planting materials along east property line. Revise site lighting plan so that we have 0 at the property line. Comply with planning and zoning administrator letter dated June 13th. Comply with township engineer requirements and county agencies. I made a note that landscaping proposed along west property is acceptable to the planning commission as shown. Consider low plantings along Holly Road in front of the detention basin for screening of basin. Review the average admin lighting ratio for compliance with ordinance requirements. I've also noted the planning commission approves additional parking spaces shown above the minimum. Just those 10 spaces that we're talking about. Anything I might have missed?
The landscaping.
The landscape by the driveways?
Yep, the landscaping notes be, on the north side, be moved to where it's more readable, or shift the plan.
Have that one.
Heard the matters of
Correct
which
landscaping, correct landscape plan to identify planting materials along east property.
Okay, well, it's not, it's be the north property line.
See, it feels north.
Right, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Mr.
I was
Buck?
just gonna ask if you wanted to incorporate Mr. Andre's comments on the distances and the site distances from the driveways.
We will work with, as long as Mr. Andre is okay with it, I'll work with Mr. Wise, Mr. Enright, and we'll make sure that the heights,
We're gonna include that though, I think.
yeah, that's fine. Yep.
And you have in there complaints with Mr. Boggs' conditions
I
on
do
the
not.
water and sewer.
No, what's the date on that one?
This is dated June 12th, 2023.
So the landscape you're talking about was reviewing the landscape material heights at entrance and exit points to the site. Anything else?
Covers all of mine. Do we, just to be clear, are we making this motion based on Mr. Smith reviewing this and making sure that all those conditions are met? Or go to another committee?
Yeah, who do you want to have the final site plan approval, I guess would be one other thing I'd like to add on there.
My preference would be site plan review committee. It gives a chance to look through it.
Anybody else have any?
I'm comfortable with Mr. Smith. I know the applicant's been working on this for a while, and I think it's a good fit. See it move forward.
Anyone else?
A lot.
Either way, doesn't matter to me. Whatever the board's preference is.
May I just, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think there's a lot of gray areas. There's a numerous things, but I think they're all black and white to do. Therefore, I would think Mr. Smith could do it.
Everyone good with that?
Yes.
All right, so the items that I have added is review the landscape material heights at entrance and exit points to the site, comply with DPW letter dated 6/12/23, and final site plan review to be reviewed by Township Planning and Zoning Administrator. So, any motion, I would, for granting preliminary site plan approval, I would say, suggest complies with what I've reviewed verbally here. We'll provide a copy of that.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we approve special land use.
Yep.
Oh, wait, I think I'm on the wrong card, sorry. Back up. Site plan review.
Preliminary.
Preliminary.
Preliminary site plan review for 11/31/1131, case number 1131. Pending that the following, the conditions that we have listed are met, and we'll give Mr. Smith the authority to make sure those i's are dotted and t's are crossed.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Anderson, support.
Ms. Hugo?
I'm sorry,
Was it?
It was me.
Ms. Hugo. Any further discussion? If not, a vote is in order. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes 8-0.
Thank you very much. I just want to make a note, I was rereading through the road commission reviews, and the last condition was that very specific requirements about placement of landscape in the intersection and the vision points at the intersections. So we'll follow the road commission's requirements then.
Great, thank you. In case someone wants to walk to the railroad tracks.
Told me 5 minutes ago.
Mr. Enright? Mr. Enright, make sure you send me copies of all those approvals too, please, if you would. Absolutely, yes. Appreciate it. Road Commission, just, I don't think, I may have, I just, if you haven't, send it, please. If you have, then I could already have it. I just want to make sure that I have all copies of all approvals.
Do it now, so got to make them all follow the same rules.
Thank you. Yes.
You'd be welcome to extend that sidewalk.
All right, next item on the agenda will be text amendment
Public hearing,
for recreational vehicles.
public hearing too.
Yes. Anything that, who's going to go over this one?
I'll let Andy start it and I'll throw my two cents in
Okay.
at the end.
Yeah, so I'll keep it pretty simple, but there were no changes since the material you saw at last meeting. It sounded like you were all pretty content with the way it was written, so we did not change a thing. Again, just to remind everybody here that the purpose of the amendment is to just specify the April 1st to November 1st timeframe, that the recreational vehicle can be parked on an approved driveway during that time. And then also just make consistent references to the term recreational vehicle. And then also prohibit the on-street parking of the recreational vehicle as well.
So this was just because of you folks here, it was approved back in 2021, I believe, when I first got here, and then we, with having taken over code enforcement now, and now talking with my code enforcement officers, the reason for the change was just for clarification. Some of these big ticket items that they have to write violation notices for on a semi-daily basis or daily basis, we don't want any gray area, we want everything black and white. So this is one of those things.
So at the top of the draft here, where it has zoning case XXX, that's 674?
674.h.
Any items from planning commission members? We'll go to the public, see if there's any public comment. Anyone like to address the planning commission? No, it's an easy one. So bring it back up to planning commission, and this would be to recommend approval to the township board.
Yes, sir.
Someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve recommend for approval to the township board, the text amendment 674H.
There's support for that? I'll support. We have a motion by Mr. Yancho, support by Mr. Anderson. Any further discussion? Not, vote is in order. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 8-0. All right, next item on the agenda is text amendment discussion. Mobile trailer and neighborhood commercial district.
I can begin with that if you'd like.
Sounds good.
We can just talk about the neighborhood commercial district uses first, if possible. What we're doing here is we're just presenting an idea to you that Jeremy and I and Jill have discussed. It's to kind of collapse the uses of office service and professional office into that NC zoning district. The zoning ordinance does so in the GC zone. They collapse pretty much a spectrum of zoning districts, NC, PO, and OS, all into that GC zone. So we're kind of looking to kind of replicate the same idea in the NC district, and that's to just have all those office service and professional office uses encompassed into that. In the memo, we just covered what uses would be new to the NC district on that chart. So as you'll see, there's nothing super intense in terms of traffic or use or noise or anything like that. I would say you're looking at maybe, the special use of a carryout restaurant being new to the PO that's existing in the PO. That would be new to the NC district. Perhaps maybe some of those commercial and personal service uses as well. But overall, we see things kind of lining up well for that neighborhood corridor, neighborhood commercial district. We also see this as kind of an implementation item for the master plan, because I think the master plan wanted to kind of collapse some of those traditional office uses into the NC future land use. And I think that this is consistent with that idea. I think maybe rethinking the office district in general might be a bigger step and a next step, but this is kind of a quicker fix that makes things more consistent, right, Jeremy?
Yes, sir.
And if you want to speak about the applicability of this, that might be helpful.
Yeah, it's consistency. We just want to make sure that, my term for it is down zoning. So in general commercial, everything is allowed by either permitted use or special land use, neighborhood commercial, office, OS and PO is allowed in general commercial. We basically want to have the same language put into NC that allows office and professional office allowed at NC. So we're just consistency basis. Basically, it'll read the same. If you look in your ordinance book, there's under the first item under permitted uses, it says all uses listed as principal uses permitted in the office service, professional office, and neighborhood commercial districts are a permitted use under general commercial.
So you're looking to do a similar thing with NC. You're not eliminating a zoning district at this time anyway.
Right, we don't want to eliminate anything yet, because I still think there's some uses for some of those in certain areas. So it's low traffic, low intensity uses, you know, especially along Hill Road, there's a lot of OS and PO there, and because there's a lot of residential behind it, so you've got that low use that's next to the residential as that buffer. You don't want high use commercial, so this is, I don't know if we may never eliminate any of the other districts, but this is a good fix for the interim.
All right, I understand now. Makes sense. Mr. Andre?
I guess to either Andy or Jeremy, so it sounds like it's kind of the consolidating of some of these of ordinances and cross-pollination of the uses, I guess, between the three different districts. Does that sound about right?
It's not really did you say restriction or reduce?
This is kind of crossing over in the uses and allowances within those same uses. It's kind of making it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I talked with Jill a few months ago about this, and the intent was always there to have that and be allowed to do that. But now we just, with consistency, we want to make sure it's in black and white. So if somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to do this in NC, but it's not allowed because it doesn't have this paragraph like it has in the permitted and the special land use and commercial, general commercial, it doesn't have it in NC. We just want to have that added in there so that way there's never any question if a use can be done or not in NC.
Sure. No, I like the idea, I do like the idea of having that flexibility and inherent flexibility between the zoning, especially as you look and I did on the zoning map, there's not that much NC, and it's grouped very specific in some areas, and so you're limiting the uses, and I see what you're doing, you're expanding with this proposal, expanding those potential uses there, so I do like that. One of the things that I also, though, when I think of that, is neighborhood commercial and where some of those areas are, I think they would serve well to be neighborhood type commercial businesses as opposed to an office or something like that. And so was there any consideration that, hey, in the NC district, adopt the OS and PO uses by special land use only, as opposed to by right?
So that, there's another paragraph that will be added in the special land use as well that basically says, this is what it reads in GC, special land uses in the OS, PO, and NC district that are not listed as permitted uses in this district. So we're basically adding two paragraphs, one under permitted, one under special land use. So basically, everything in a lower zoning or lower intensity is allowed in the higher district.
But vice versa is not. You're not allowing neighborhood commercial uses in an office district.
Right, yeah, no, you can't have a neighborhood commercial in an office district.
It's a one-way.
To make that clear.
It's a one-way road.
Yes, yeah, you can go up in intensity, but you can't go back down.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much.
So you're looking for input from the planning commission on this.
So this is a discussion, we want to have this changed, you know, we could have this, if you guys are on board with this change, we can have it as a public hearing at the next month's meeting.
Mr. Hoffman?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, so that's for existing NC. Comes if somebody comes in, wants to change the zoning to NC, and comes in with the office service.
And that's fine to do that because that's a minimum use.
The key there is then they get approval to do that, they change it to NC, and then say, oh, we're not gonna do OS, we're gonna do.
Well, the rezoning has to come before you folks, and if it's not permitted on the future land use map, then it won't be allowed anyway. So if they want to have the use, I think if I'm explaining this right, you're looking to see if they can do OS and NC, an OS use in NC.
So they're coming and say, this is zone industrial right now, or single-family home, I'm gonna change it to NC. And my purpose for changing it to NC is because OS is approved in NC, so, you know, they get the rezoning to NC. And then they say, oh, you know what, now that we have the zoning changed to NC, now we can use anything that's permitted in NC. They don't have to do the office.
Mr. Bush?
I believe that's handled under conditional zoning.
Perfect.
Well, and also when you look at that zoning request, you need to look at everything that's permitted.
Correct.
Under NC, not just what they tell you.
Right, and the future land use map would dictate.
You can go against it, but you better.
You can, but you better have a very good reason to go against that future land use map.
Yes,
And in
Mr.
conditional zoning, I know this is my second time on the planning commission, but the first time, we were burned on that several times. So that's why we changed that to the conditional zoning, and we made that. That won't happen.
Just
Making clear.
So it sounds like we're good with looking at this for next month?
Is everybody okay with going next? Yes, 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 okay. All right, so we'll move that to a public hearing next month.
Excellent.
Mobile MRI trailer.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that if you'd like.
Sure.
All right, so the mobile MRI trailers are starting to become a bit more common here in the region, I think in the state in general. They are, I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe it's a state law mechanism or a state law that requires a facility to demonstrate that they need to do a certain amount of tests before they can actually install a permanent MRI within a clinic or a hospital or the like. So a lot of people are using this to demonstrate their number of tests. And these are often trailers, 8.5 foot wide, 40 long, sometimes about 13.5 foot high. And we've seen them in different communities. Some of them propose a kind of a permanent install, semi-permanent, where they sit there for 6 months or a year, don't move, but they might install a breezeway or something that connects the building to the trailer's door to kind of usher patients into the MRI in a more private, more secure manner. Some of them just simply sit on a paved pad in a parking lot. So there's different ways that these have kind of come about. Right now, the zoning ordinance seems to regulate these in calling these accessory mobile medical technology units, but they only do so in the zoning ordinance only allows so in the HCD district.
Is there another district that you think they should be in?
And I think that's kind of our discussion is the zoning, plenty of zoning districts allow medical clinics and whatnot that are probably wanting to, not probably, but potentially considering this type of a use. And I think it does make sense, but these do have some, lack of a better term, some baggage with them. They're loud. They're noisy. You want them to be consistently installed. If they're going to be somebody that leaves the site each night, you want them to locate in the same spot that they were approved to locate. In my recommendation, we would want thorough screening because these are emitting 60, 70 decibels measured 10 to 50 feet from these. So I don't think that they want to be adjacent to a backyard or to a residence. And I think they should follow probably principal building setbacks as well, just because these are going to be used pretty heavily, not just potentially creating a sound nuisance, but potentially being just a heavily trafficked use where people are coming in and out all throughout the day. And then also just considering time frame standards, you may wish to require them to connect to a principal structure with a breezeway or a canopy of some means, just to make sure that they're kind of in a consistent operation on a day-to-day basis. Or maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you would just allow them to sit on a concrete pad that's screened properly, that's set back properly from residences, we have some ideas there in the memo. So happy to pass this to Jeremy to summarize kind of the township-specific needs.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we feel this may be a need going forward in the future. That's why it's in front of you. But I have, myself and Superintendent Lehman have discussed this at length, and we've got concerns, screening, noise, and time being on the site. And I don't know if there needs to be, time-wise, if there needs to be a two-part, where it's there's two temporary, one has to be there, can be there, like you said, up to a couple months at a time, or there could be one where can only be there 3 days a week. Something to consider. Screening is a big thing, because my concern is if it's abutting residential zoning, that could be an issue, especially with the noise too. Our noise ordinance at normal operating times between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., the most you can be is 55 decibels. And if some of these are already at 60, that's
Well, where is that measured? At the property line?
that we'd have to, but there's another issue is we don't really have the tools, because you can have a decibel meter, but it has to be, basically it has to
Somebody
be.
can challenge it and say it hasn't been tested.
Well, exactly, it has to be it's almost like a radar gun for a police officer. It's gotta be, dialed in every so often, and then it has to, so there's issues. Another thing that we have is appearance. If you can see the photo that was provided on the front page of the memo, we got to be cognizant of appearance, stickers, logos, whatnot, and potentially coloring of the trailer. We don't want a neon green trailer in the back of even if it's in the back of a facility that's already existing. We'd want it to be earth tones, I would think, or white, or something that doesn't stick out. But some other things to consider. We're not saying we don't want them in the township. We're just saying we definitely need to really
Stay ahead of it.
but we also we have standards in Grand Blanc Township, and we want to make sure that no matter what we bring to the planning commission or be allowed in our township has been scrutinized heavily.
So I think we're probably, I guess speaking for myself, interested in seeing some language that the consultant would prepare, make sure they incorporate the items that you mentioned as well, and then we can discuss. We're not ready to go to the public hearing by any means.
No, I don't think we're at a public hearing yet, just because we don't have language put forth, but I think at the next meeting, we could definitely, it'll definitely be a shorter meeting in August, so we could really hammer down on this at the next meeting with some more details.
Yeah, and we can look into where medical clinics are, what zone are they most likely to fall in, which Jeremy probably hasn't, you all probably have an idea. And just see where these are best suited. If there's
Possible that you might require it to be attached to a medical facility instead of, put in the back of a.
Yeah.
That's another thing to consider, yes.
Mr. Bush, I think he had his hand.
Mr. Chairman, a couple things that I thought was, it would be nice to know how many MRI machines we have in Grand Blanc Township currently. I know there's a few, I don't know an exact number. And I also, I heard that these may be, it's hard to get MRIs, we all know that, and they're backed up. So I want to make sure that if that's what we think as a planning commission, we want to make sure our citizens are taken care of first and foremost. And I don't want to make these so restrictive that they won't come here, because we do need to think of the people that need these things.
Mr. Yancho?
I want to ask for clarification. I thought I heard that these places, these mobile units are needed for some type of training purposes or permitting purposes, licensing purposes. Are those licenses for a person or for the business or clinic? And does that training then necessarily have to take place at the particular clinic that may want to install an MRI machine?
So bear with me because I apologize. This is all stuff I've heard from other public hearings from applicants. I would need to research the state law that regulates this, but I've heard that it's for the facility to potentially expand or put their own the brick and mortar clinic to potentially add a facility there at that location. In order to do so, in order to get it licensed by the state, they need to demonstrate a specific number of tests. And apparently the state will not license you to put in a permanent MRI machine if you have not demonstrated a particular number of tests. We can definitely provide some more certain regulation reference before we move on.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, but I've been in an MRI machine, but if an MRI machine is in a building, what type of decibel level is occurring on the outside of the building?
It's a good question.
Because we may, if it's a location where we're concerned about the decibels, we may not want an MRI machine, even a permanent installation at that location. So I'd like to see some more information.
Would still have to comply with our. We can't regulate where they go. Our current ordinance with regarding.
Mr. Chairman, something else that just kind of came to mind. I know we don't want to over-regulate that, like Mr. Bush said, but another thing that we could potentially look at, we just recently, if you remember, for used vehicles, we kind of gave them a little bit more of a leniency because we took it, the way it originally was written was you couldn't have a residential zoning district but a automobile zoning commercial district. But we've expanded that to now where their use is for that for the used car lot, we have a 500-foot buffer now. So you can still have used car lots, a commercial lot that butts residential. Maybe in that same light, we have something like that as a setback for these to combat that noise too. I'm not saying that that has to be what we have to do, but just kind of something to look into too.
Yeah, and also oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple comments.
Ms. Coulter?
One is, in terms of whether there's really a necessity or a likelihood that, you may have applications for these MRI facilities. I Googled MRI facilities in Genesee County, and there's about 10 of them. So, it may be that this will never come up as an issue, but the other thing is apparently in our zoning ordinance now, as from what I read in the memo, we do allow them but only in the healthcare district. Which makes a lot of sense to me. Because in the healthcare district, you're not going to have a lot of the issues that we were talking about, like, it abuts a residential neighborhood or, blah, blah, blah. It seems like the logical place to start if you're going to allow these MRI facilities, that you kind of limit them to the healthcare district.
Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, again, I want to reiterate, I would like to see a time frame, certain number of months or so forth, that we could enforce this. And I also think that allowing these should also be reviewed by Mr. Smith or even the fire commission. You don't want to park this trailer in where it's going to affect a fire truck getting access to a building or maybe to a neighboring building. Also, if the zoning for that building requires 45 parking spaces for the number of square footage of the building, that this doesn't take up 6 of those parking spaces. Okay, so things like that should be considered. That's my only comment at this time.
Very good. Mr. Hoff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would have to think that the state, if they have to demonstrate the need of these things, they're probably going to say a certain number during a certain time period. The thing that I would probably do is maybe look into saying, if it's, you need to have a 50 within a 1 month time period, go ahead, take a shot at it. but if you don't get it, it's not like you get to try again the next month and the next month and the next month and the next month. I would think we would need to have the availability for them to test it and see if they need to do it, but not have this, just keep it there for the next 3 years, and finally, when you hit the lottery and you hit 50 in the 1 month, then you can finally get it, the scenario. So letting them have the ability to show, but not letting them just keep doing it forever. And then the second thing is, if it is only a month or two, I don't know how many restrictions I want to put on them, like screening and stuff like that. Why would we make them build a fence or plant plantings and things of that nature if it's only going to be there for a month? If it's going to be there for 2 or 3 years, I get it, but for a month, I just don't think that'd be a little overkill. And then as far as agreeing with the decimals, I mean, if a building is built there, it has to adhere to sound. So you would think that this would have to just adhere to the same mechanisms than the person who's already operating there. Just you gotta adhere to the same thing. Or if it's, hey, there's just no way to do the soundproofing that much, fine, then your hours are restricted to 9 in the morning to 5 o'clock at night. You can't operate, at night then at all. If you can't get down to the decibels that you can do, you can only work during the day. So those are my
Sounds like first step is doing a little bit of research.
two cents.
To Dolores's comment, we allow medical facilities even in our lowest commercial in the OS. So limiting it to the healthcare district may not be the best spot, because if you look at our zoning map, the only healthcare district that we really have, Genesis owns all the property. So that doesn't really afford these to really be in the community as much as we think they may need to be in the future. So just food for thought, just so you're aware, the healthcare district, if you look in your zoning ordinance, Genesis predominantly owns, I'd say if it's not 100%, it's pretty close to it. But we also allow medical facilities throughout all of our commercial districts. So just food for thought.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure whether, actually, and you answered my one
Yeah.
question I was thinking
Yep.
about. You're saying that Genesis basically literally owns most of the healthcare district. I know there are parts of it that are not owned.
Right, so if it's not, it's 90% they own. So, and like I said, there's other medical facilities that potentially could use this that are in OS. So, and then another thing too is maybe if you don't, Mr. Hoffman's point is if you don't want to have this screening, my concern is the residential. So maybe we don't allow this if they abut residential, if you don't want the screening. Another food for thought.
Put it as a bullet point on there for consideration.
Yeah.
Mr. Hoffman, I think you had something.
What about emergencies? I mean, we have a tornado that comes through. I mean, do we have contingencies for MRI trailers and Red Cross trailers and everything like that? I mean, do they have to be stationed in certain places, or is there a leeway for emergencies?
I think if it's a state of emergency, the state takes over, the county, they pretty much do what they want. We're at their mercy.
I wouldn't want, I wouldn't want.
Yeah, if a tornado came through and ripped through Grand Blanc Township, if they needed to park it, whatever they needed to in our parking lot, I think we'd be more than accommodating. Or if they were at the church next door, we wouldn't say boo if they were there for a couple weeks.
For emergencies, I would want things to be allowed.
Yep.
And I'm sorry.
One more thing,
Real
Mr.
quick,
Andre?
I just want to, I think timing is a concern, I think, as well. I'm going to kind of echo a couple of those things, is the time period at which it would be, because you start to think, when does an accessory structure kind of take over as a primary use, right?
Right.
And I have a personal friend who is in this business, in mobile MRI, and business is good, okay? And it is a wave of the future. So I'm not sure if you guys were just trying to get out in front of it at this point, because that's a great thing, because it is going to continue to come. And so I think that time period at which the mobile MRI would be there, I think is a critical thing to know. The other thing is, if anybody's tried to schedule an MRI, they do them almost 24 hours. They do them around the clock.
Yep.
So I think having that consideration of operating period and where they're located, if you're in the healthcare district, 24 hours doesn't really matter. But if you're in O zoning at a doctor's office that's adjacent to a residential, it matters. And so I think there's a lot of bits and pieces that you guys could probably collect and gather all the information and throw some back at us. And I'll reach out to my friend and kind of get a generalization of what they experience as they go into some of the communities as well.
I was gonna say, if he would reach out to me, I would really appreciate that.
I'll be happy to put you in contact.
Yes, please do. Thank you.
Yes, sir, and
Not to just prolong the meeting, but just
Bet you are.
putting my zoning administrator hat on, which I'm not, so correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, but I would think that if an existing MRI wanted to locate in a brick and mortar medical clinic building in the OS district, the zoning administrator would probably make a determination that that's an allowed accessory use incidental to the medical clinic practice and would allow such a thing with flying colors. It's just that this is the accessory mobile MRI unit, right, Jeremy?
I would highly suggest that this, no matter what district we put this in, is a special land use.
Yeah.
No matter what, just so if there's a case-by-case basis, if there's things that we need to add in there for time and screening or what have you, we have the ability to add whatever restrictions we need to on a case-by-case basis. Yes.
So we're not regulating the permanent brick and mortar MRIs,
Right,
we're regulating
that
this accessory
use,
unit.
yes, would be,
Yeah.
the accessory use to the existing office would be the mobile MRI, but that mobile MRI should also be a special land use. Yes,
I think so.
yes.
move on to committee reports.
So in your packet, you all have a flyer from the American Planning Association. The planning map, American Planning Association, I know Giffords is always at these planning conferences. This year it is October 4th through the 6th. It is in Grand Traverse, Michigan this year. So in my budget, I have the allowance to take a few members with me to these conferences. Hotel, food is paid for by the township. If you are interested in going, please let me know ASAP, and I can try and see how many people I can go with me. I'm going for sure. I'm already reserved and signed up. But if you're interested in going, please let me know ASAP. Just know all of you cannot go. So I wish I could take everybody with me, but, and just as a food for thought, if you are a new member and have never been to one of these, you will probably get more preference over the senior members, no offense, that have been to some of these in the past. So if you are a newer member, I encourage you to go to these. It's all paid by the township. So please let me know as soon as you can.
Just in case you were wondering, I'm currently scheduled for knee replacement surgery at that time.
Okay, so you are withholding, or you are opting out already? Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let's see, we've got anything else from planning?
I have nothing.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So there are numerous parking lots that are not efficiently laid out. Tight radiuses, thoroughfares, things of that nature. So far, all I've really heard of regulating is how many parking spaces there can be. Are we doing any, I know that we did something where we're thinking about widening or lengthening. Yeah.
We already approved that, yep.
That was the parking space itself, though.
And the drive lanes in between the parking spaces, yes.
And is that going to be, so that's going to solve all those problems?
No, not necessarily, but it's,
I wish you would have said yes.
they're in something that I look at as each site plan comes through. We have, you've got the parking lot islands that we look at because once you get to a certain distance, you have to add those in there. And you see that in that Randy Wise site plan, they have the parking islands in there. So that's things that I look at on a site plan that doesn't necessarily get brought up at a meeting, but if it didn't comply, it would be in my report. So if there's something that you think is not in compliance, please bring it to my attention and I will look at it. But
And it's not just big vehicles, people driving longer vehicles. It's a longer vehicle being parked where even a smaller vehicle now has to deal with that car being parked there. Heaven forbid, two big vehicles parked rear to rear and having to pull out. And the one next to you was a little bit further out, so you got to come back even more because before you can make the swing. I mean, there just seems to be numerous amounts of parking issues that we have here in Grand Blanc.
And a lot of it stems from that the 9x18 old standard doesn't really help much in these today's standards in these bigger cars. Back in the day, you didn't have these monster long Tahoes, Suburbans, trucks that have an 8-foot bed on them. We're trying to combat that with the bigger spaces and with the wider drive lanes. And if they get into angled parking, we've got the turn radiuses that's built into the book already. But if it's a existing business,
Right.
they're legal non-conforming, and then until they really bring something to us, I can't force them to restripe and conform to today's standards until they bring me something. So they update their site. If they're looking to remodel, that's the time that I can hit them for, okay, well, you need to restripe their.
So it's a good move that we made. We're moving in the right direction.
It is.
It's perfect. That's all I was trying to bring up. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Township Board,
Nothing to report.
about zoning, or EZA.
We,
Last September? You went
last
back?
September, we just canceled the July one, so we haven't had
Almost a year.
It's been almost a year since we've had a zoning board. That means that the work that we're doing here and all these amendments are working.
I was just gonna say.
They are working, and they are working well.
Excellent.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I make.
I have a question.
Sorry, you interrupted me.
I'll try and
No
be
motions
short.
yet.
Jeremy, what's going on at the tank plant? Putting in a new entrance on Dord Highway?
New entrance.
Yeah, they've cut right up to the fence. They've cut the brush on both sides of the fence, and they've got a limestone driveway. It's directly across from,
Visit that tomorrow, huh?
Yep.
what's that?
That's news
Better
to
go
me.
visit that tomorrow.
That's news to me, because they were doing additions to the building that the site plan review saw for electric vehicle battery storage, but
It's a temporary
it
construction.
may be a temporary I'll have to get with the building department and see if they know what's going on too, because,
Directly across from Ross Warehouse entrance.
is it? Okay, I'll take a look at it and see what's going on, because that shouldn't be, there was no proposal for any new entrance designs per the additions, so. I'll take a look at it.
Thank you. That's all.
Site Plan Review Committee. We did see Consumers Power is gonna go into, or lease building 4100 Baldwin Road. What was the previous use of that?
Innovative Technologies, I believe.
It's property next to Gainey Drive,
Yes.
basically. And it's mostly improvements to stormwater, adding small number of parking spaces, a little bit of restriping, not a whole lot. So we gave them preliminary site plan approval and then deferred to Mr. Smith to check things off and make sure they look good and he's able to grant final site. But there's Consumers Power quite a few consumer power vehicles in there right now.
Yeah, there was a big miscommunication, and they are already currently occupying the building, but they are rectifying all the issues. The fire department went through it, and with our fire marshal, there's really, the only thing left really to do, there's a firewall in the storage portion of it, just for security reasons. They wanted
This
to have them.
facility is for them to be able to respond within a certain radius for some construction.
Yep. One more thing to add, if before the next meeting in August, if you'll let me know if you're interested in the MAP conference, that way I can start making reservations and things so we don't get, make sure we can secure the spots.
I think Mr. Anderson had something.
I would like to make a motion that we adjourn tonight's meeting, 8:54 PM.
Is there support for that?
Everyone's like, support.
They've stood up already.
Support.
Support by Ms. Hugo. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, we are adjourned.